Welcome to Centreville Voice. Hey everybody, welcome to Centreville Voice. My name is Carlo Volpe.
I'm Desmond Silva, and welcome to the show. This is our very first episode here on Centreville Voice, where we're bringing you the moderate view. So I've been doing debates on social media for some time now. Carlo, he's been doing his own podcast for now. We got Carlo. He's been doing Fatso Radio.
Right.
We can talk a little bit about what that is after the show, at the end of the show. But let's get into this. So one thing that hit me was we got a lot of people talking on the right, a lot of people talking on the left, but you don't have many people talking in the middle. Now we do have some voices that are out there.
Yeah.
But one thing that hit me, especially from left-leaning politicians like AOC, Ms. Cortez over there, who went on television and said that being a moderate is not a political stance. She's like, being a moderate is meh. And we could actually put that video in a link to the description when we put this thing up on YouTube.
Yeah.
But we're here to show you it's not just meh. Moderates are the glue that holds the countries together, because without moderates, you wouldn't have the right and the left just being able to talk it out. As a matter of fact, they'd be out in civil war.
Yeah.
Well,
my understanding as well is the definition of being bipartisan, right? Is somewhere in the middle, being a centrist.
Exactly, being a centrist, being able to objectively view both sides and their issues, their solutions, and try to come up with a solution to that that's practical and useful without being ideological, like purely ideological.
Well, here's a perfect example of what we're having trouble with right now in society, is finding the balance, finding the moderate view of free speech, right? So let's get into it. The left is some far factions of the left, or from far stances on the left is really going for censorship, complete censorship, where we don't want anybody saying anything, or as long as it doesn't fit their narrative, right? They want to ban it. The other side, the right, typically fights for freedoms, but typically the left as well. So this is why this is confusing for me. But the other side of the coin, the other side of the argument is saying, hey, wait a second. Freedom of speech is important. It's one of the most fundamental freedoms, and I do believe that as well. Without the freedom of speech, without the fear of censorship, right? So how can you get anything discussed, anything intelligent, from science to anything?
Exactly.
Right.
Like I've got like, we can take a look at the First System Charter. Like, we're both of us from Canada. We're based out of Ontario, and so we're going to go about with Canada's thing on freedom of speech. And essentially, under the heading of fundamental freedoms, Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms states that everyone has the following fundamental freedoms: one, freedom of conscience and religion; freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication; freedom of peace and freedom of peaceful assembly; and freedom of association. So those essentially would, it implies freedom of speech that's in there, because you have freedom of opinion that's there, freedom of expression that's there. And the only time that these can be stripped away is during war times, of course, when the military and is basically trying to keep certain army secrets, the military secrets, away from the opponents, right? From their opponents or their enemy that they're trying to combat. For the USA, of course, they've got the First Amendment down south. So in that one here, basically the First Amendment provides that Congress makes no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting its free exercise. It protects freedom of speech, the press, assembly, and the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So that's straight from whitehouse.gov on their White House website.
So Des, let's get right down to the grassroots, or the bare bones of it. Why is freedom of speech so important?
Oh yeah, because the thing is, if without freedom of speech, you don't have the chance to challenge new ideas or challenge old ideas,
or terrible ideas.
You don't have the chance to criticize those and remain objective. You don't have the chance to remain objective in it. Now, of course, freedom of speech, because of the way that it's done, people are able to bounce ideas off each other. And ultimately through logic and reason, that with tempered by compassion, of course,
Mhm.
that you end up with an ultimate truth that comes out of it.
Yeah.
Now, if you have censorship and you have it such that one side speaking and blocking off the other side, then that's not freedom of speech. Okay. The one thing that the left says a lot, these far left says a lot these days, is that freedom of speech does not come without the consequences, right? Which is kind of like, well, the only consequence that should come from freedom of speech is the other side debates you.
Yes.
They use their freedom of speech to debate you.
Yes,
To
exactly.
yeah. To give
So
you
that's the thing.
criticize
If your speech is so wrong, then other speech should be able to prove it's wrong. That's the thing.
Exactly.
Idiocy needs to be called out, right? And you can only
Exactly.
call out idiocy if you let it speak. And it sounds controversial to a lot of people on the left because they're like, well, it's hate speech. You can't paint everything with hate speech because if you do that, what happens when your speech becomes hate speech?
Yeah.
Right? It's just easily for them to turn today saying I want to hurt somebody or I want to punch somebody in the face is not hate speech, but tomorrow it might be hate speech, right? And what happens when your speech now becomes hate speech? But that's right. It's like it's one of those things where I don't think people realize how fundamental it is to be able to say things. And it's so crazy, but it's the people I find that don't want to investigate. They don't want to challenge it. They want to say, well, I'm told that it's wrong, and that's what I'm just going to say is wrong. I don't want to offend anybody, and that's what it is. I think it is. Do you think it's just an extension of we're afraid to offend everybody, so we put these mittens on?
Well, that's what happens, especially here in Canada. Everyone's like, "Oh, I'm sorry about this. I'm sorry about that." We're like, you're taught to be super nice.
Yeah.
I learned this out of the most funniest type of way of finding. But this is a good lesson that they're teaching kids on TV. There's a kids cartoon. I don't know how many people know about this kids cartoon. It's called Teen Titans Go.
Yes.
Okay, it's hilarious as heck. But this is like, I'm very critical of a lot of shows these days that kids watch.
Yeah.
But this is the one show, and this one show is wacky as heck.
I love it.
But it goes. There's one character on that, which is her name is Raven, and she is the cynic in the group, right? She's the real cynic in the group. If someone does something stupid, she'll tell you to your face.
Yeah.
Right? She'll tell you to your face, this is dumb, this is stupid, and she'll tell you the reasons as to why.
Yeah.
Right. And this was one episode where the other kids are basically, other teenagers are they're saying, why are you so mean? Right? Why can't you be nice and just go along with it?
Yeah.
Right? And she's like, no, mean people are there so that mean people that are honest need to be there so to stop stupid people from doing dumb things. Right?
Well, it's true, right? It's like if you only let your ideas flourish, if you only let your idea echo chamber, right? If you only hear your ideas, then when are you ever going to realize that your idea is wrong? And if you think your idea is never going to be wrong, well, then we have to end this conversation because we all have to. We're all going to have wrong, and we're all going to make mistakes, and we all have to learn, because things change over time. But it's crazy. It's like, well, we can't say that because you might hurt somebody's feelings. Why are you hurting their feelings? And if their feelings are so hurt about this, let's dig into this. Like, what are we talking about? I think it has a lot to do with, like we've talked about in other episodes on Fatso Radio. It's like people oftentimes get recreationally offended. It's like it's almost in vogue right now to say, "Oh, I'm offended by this. I'm offended by that." Like, oh my God. Right? Because you then assert a little bit of authority, right? A little bit of like society authority over other people if you're the one now shaming other people. And that's the thing. A lot of people are jumping on the shame boat now. A lot of people are pointing fingers now if you question anything. And to the to the freedom of speech, like, it's so important. It's even more important now because people are trying to shit on our freedom of speech. People are trying to quell us or to say you shouldn't challenge this, shouldn't challenge that. When someone tells you to start questioning things, that's when you need to question more, right?
And the worst part is this is coming from the left who call themselves progressive.
Yeah, I don't.
If you look at what they're doing, it's not progressive. It's very regressive. I mean, look at it this way. Someone comes with a dumb idea. I bring up that cartoon example. Now, of course, this is a cartoon you think about. So, one of the characters wants to marry a pot of chili.
I've been there.
Which is obviously a dumb idea.
Sure.
Okay. So so Raven goes and just says this is dumb, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, so eventually her friend learns that, yeah, it is dumb. It is a dumb idea. And
Yeah.
she's glad that she tells her that eventually. But the thing is with the left, what's going on is you have everyone basically saying, let's go forward, let's keep moving forward. The thing is, when you're moving forward somewhere, you got to look where you're going when you're moving forward.
Yeah, and not
You could be moving
binders
forward
on.
this way, that way, that way, that way, whatever the case is, right?
Forward is not always just straight. You're right.
Exactly. Forward is not always just straight. Like it's straight relative to where you're looking.
But there's turns.
But there's turns
Yeah.
in the road. There could be a bend of the road, which if you don't go on, if you don't turn or whatever, you're going to end up going off a cliff. You know, and you have a bunch of academics who are preaching all this philosophy, which half of this stuff is BS, in my opinion. If you can actually go into the reason as to why it's BS, because there's a lot of philosophers that are proving this stuff wrong. Excuse me. So, yeah, and the thing is to be able to criticize that is something that needs to be done. Otherwise, what's happening is it's the Spanish Inquisition or the Salem witch hunt all over again.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking, I mean, anytime that we had censorship of this sort, people suffered, right? And it's happening now. I mean, look what's happening. People are getting, censored and canceled left and right, right? Just because of what they believe. And it's gotten so far that not just, I mean, it was just conservatives before, but now they're going after classic liberals.
Eat their own.
So when I talk about the left, I'm not talking about normal liberals who actually have a head on their shoulder.
That's where I live on
left
that
of
side
center.
of left. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or people who are left of center.
Yeah.
But we're talking about people who are like extremists, like far, far left.
Well, this is
the type that are basically starting riots and burning buildings and stuff like that.
Well, this is what I can't get is that when people think that, when I hear censorship, I just hear, what are you hiding? What are you trying to hide? Right?
Exactly.
The original forbidden fruit or whatever, the fruit of knowledge. What kind of knowledge we were hiding? That's a different argument. But it's like, just have you ever had a bad idea? Of course you have, right? Have you ever made a mistake? Of course.
Yeah.
Have you ever had
Everyone
an idea where either your mother or your father, somebody with either some wisdom or just some perspective, course corrected you a little and said, hey, that's not. Could you imagine if people weren't allowed to, like, you know what I mean? Could you imagine if over the years we weren't allowed to fight against what was right? If people, anything, any political change, anything to be voted on, any for referendums, any sort of like everything from what kind of curriculum you're going to have in your school or what kind of medicine we're going to have, stuff like that. Like it's so important because you can't have intelligent debate without free speech, without fully allowing someone to articulate, right? Or
exactly. And so that's what it is.
And so what's going on?
What I've seen is the most is that we've got whenever there was whenever free speech was at a risk of being threatened, is typically due to ideology.
Yeah. Well, the government afraid to lose power, right? Too.
Yeah, they're afraid to lose power, or they want to gain power. With whatever case, there's a power struggle based on ideology, where I believe a certain thing and it should not be criticized at all or face criticism at all. My belief is absolute, and your belief is supposed to be shut down. And it used to be that we could tolerate. We were taught tolerance before. That okay, there are people who have different beliefs, come from different backgrounds, and we tolerated it. But now it's acceptance. The problem with acceptance is that by accepting one side, you had to give up the other side and go against it.
And there's not much acceptance going on because this whole cancel culture, like if they really were tolerant, like you said, or even acceptant of it, they wouldn't be trying to cancel everybody. Like you said, you have to let this shows me that they don't believe their ideas are good. Because if you really thought your ideas are good, then you would let your ideas be challenged and say, okay, you have a better idea? Let me hear your better ideas. This to me sounds like we know our ideas are bad, but we're just going to push it like bullies. And that's what they're getting away with, right?
They are. It essentially is bullying. I mean, the Twitter mob itself is bullies. They're just a bunch of bullies.
Oh,
right.
I mean, it's crazy what's going on with the whole, like you said, even the cancel culture. To try and just cancel somebody because they've said one thing and there's no redemption. It's crazy in this cancel world. There's no redemption. Like,
Oh
of
yeah.
course, there's no redemption, there's no religion, there's no God, there's no nothing for them, right? So,
But the thing is, it's turning into a cult type
yeah,
of the way that they believe it. I have one friend of mine. I know this one couple who happens to be family friends. They got into this whole woke thing type of scenario, right? And if I ever questioned or debated anything, they, one of them would basically say, "Please stop, posting anything in regards to my posts.
just get offended
Say,
about it.
just stop it."
Yeah.
And on my birthday, she wished me happy birthday. She says, she also added, "I hope that you end up with a more enlightened view of the world, a more enlightened view."
Wow, that's a
So you know what?
backhand.
Yeah, that's her view. She says, "Oh, it's enlightenment." Like
Yeah.
she's actually like a Buddhist or something like that. Like Siddhartha Gautama, the first Buddha,
Yeah.
he the founder of Theravada Buddhism. He had real enlightenment. The man had wisdom beyond compare. I'm Christian, and I can still say that that man was a very wise man. Um, this is not wise. This is no. And I still remember when she said, um, she told me, may you find a more enlightened view. I replied to her, "Oh, thanks very much, Buddha Hamani." Buddha Hamani in my parents' language, Sinhalese, means "may you be a Buddha."
Okay. All right. Well,
Which
and
means may you gain enlightenment
yeah,
also, right? So that's the thing. And it's kind of, so it was a bit of a joke, right? It was
yeah.
a joke that, because it was kind of funny, because they come up with some saying. One time we were discussing about truth, and the other fellow basically said, "Oh, what is truth?" I'm like, "Okay, Pontius Pilate."
Yeah,
So
that's true. Big question.
because Pontius Pilate went to Jesus and was like, "What is truth?"
Yeah.
Right? So like truth is, for me, truth is obtained through scrutiny.
Yeah.
You propose an idea. It is a hypothesis. You have to go with a hypothesis because it has to be an educated
Hmm.
idea, an educated idea that you're proposing, right? Or an educated guess.
Yeah.
So, and basically follow the scientific method, right?
Hmm. Well, could you just imagine? Could you imagine that there was no, could you imagine that you didn't use these philosophies or this kind of methodology in science or in any types of real profession where there's no room for BS. There's no room for fluffiness. You need truth.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said, you need truth, and truth
Exactly.
is what free speech is. It's all about your truth may not be conducive to me, right? I may not like your
No.
truth, but it's still your truth.
Yeah, but the thing is, there
It still needs
is
to
a
be
thing
said.
such as absolute truth, because a lot of people have their
Sure.
own truth, but that own truth that's relative to them is not necessarily objective. It could be subjective, and the only way to find out if it's objective or subjective is to criticize it, is to
Knock it down or try and
put it
break
to
it
the
apart.
test.
Yes.
Yeah, just put it to the test. That's what it is.
Exactly.
And it's not about being nice; it's about being honest
And exactly, and that's what every
and
idea needs
responsible.
to be scrutinized, right? Even
Yes.
the best ideas need to be scrutinized the most, right? And
Yeah.
so the bad ideas should fall apart, and we should let it fall apart in a town square so people can see it. And that's the thing. The worst
Exactly.
ideas need to fall apart with the biggest spotlight. Like that's why ideas like KKK, white supremacists, and all these different crazy terrorist organizations, that's what they are. They're terrorist organizations, right?
Mhm.
But let them speak so we can point at them and say, don't do this. And this is wrong, and see why it's wrong, right? And that's what I truly believe in. But of course, there's limitations on, letting things get carried away. But, let's get into this free speech, what's going on relative today. Like you said, like it's what can you say and what can you not say? You can't compare things to historical things anymore. People are getting shit for that, right?
Yeah, which is, and that's, I think that's a really big problem. I mean, there's an old saying that I forgot the name of the person who quoted that, but you can easily find this on the internet easily. Just look up who quoted the following saying: is those who do not learn from history are bound to repeat it, or those who do not look to history are doomed to repeat it. Something along those lines, not exactly those words, but you get the idea, right?
For sure. And that's the problem, that nobody knows history
times
anymore, and they act like these are new ideas. This is the first time. Like, I'm not saying that everybody's saying this, but oftentimes I hear, or I get the impression from social media and the news, and even sometimes this online media, that like, oh, it's the first time if anybody's ever dealt with racism. Are you kidding me? but that's the impression, right? It's like the woke generation is like, hey, boomers, hey, old people, did you know there's racism? Excuse me, son. Excuse me. Yes, we know there's
Exactly.
racism. Ask anybody. And we've been dealing with racism since the beginning of time, and it's a work in progress. It didn't just come yesterday.
Exactly. Geez, I remember when I was a kid, I faced racism from the day from day like day one. The earliest age that I faced racism was when I was 1 year old with my mom and dad. I remember when I
Even
was
they
a
didn't like
kid.
you? No, just kidding.
No. It's not that my mom and dad
I
are
know.
racist against. How can parents be racist against their
I
own
know.
kid?
I'm kidding.
No, but it was me and my mother and father who faced a guy in an airport who happened to be airport worker, right?
Wow.
The guys that took the tickets and maybe checked your passports and all that stuff and told you and basically guided you on the airplane and all that stuff. Those people.
Yeah.
My father told me about this incident as that our first trip to Sri Lanka after I was born, right? So I was born and raised here, but when I was about a year old, one of my aunties was getting married. So my mom and my mom and dad took me and went to Sri Lanka for the wedding.
Okay.
On the way there, we met I don't know, I think I think he was Dutch or something like that. I forgot which one he was, but he was a man from Europe. And he told my parents that I at 1 year old they couldn't carry me and they couldn't put me in a stroller. They had to make me walk all the way down that long tube thing. You know that the thing that they attach it to the plane. I forgot what it's called. Yeah. So I had to walk along that.
Oh my God.
But the white kid with the white family that was there with their kid, who was
Really?
older than me by about a year or so, obviously he was able to walk. They could put that kid in the stroller.
Oh my God.
And go.
So you were 1 year old.
I was 1 year old.
That's crazy.
My mother and father recall this thing.
Crazy.
And I remember I faced racist stuff all through my entire life.
And even to the idea of racism, right? Like without free speech, you wouldn't be able to see and hear and read if people are racist. You know what I mean?
And as a matter of fact, when I combated it, it was by challenging people's view of it. I remember like when we were at one of St. Mary's, which is the Carlo and I went to the same high school. So I guess our main rival high school in all the sports events was a school called St. Mary's.
Yep.
And I remember getting on the bus at St. Mary's for the first time when I was in, back in the Sioux, and it filled up. I was the only colored kid in the entire bus, and for the first time, these guys are seeing a colored person. They come up and me, oh, where are you from? I'm like, Toronto. No, where are you from? I'm born and raised in Toronto. No, where are you from? If you're asking where my parents are from, it's Sri Lanka. And they're like, oh, where is that? It's the island just south of India. Oh, he's a Paki. I'm like, no. Well, you're from India, right? Like, oh, you're Paki, right? Yeah, well, calling a Sri Lankan Paki is like calling a French guy a wop. I just put right to them. And these guys are bigger than me at that time. These were bigger than me.
Everybody was bigger than you. I remember you in grade 9.
I was not that big guy. Yeah, everybody was bigger than me at that time. This was grade 9 or 10, right? I was a skinny, scrawny kid. And but I didn't take crap from anybody.
That's right.
Let's put it that way.
That's right.
But the thing is, and they're like, well, it says, oh, and everyone's like, oh, and they're like, oh, you better not say that on this bus. I'm like, well, you better not call me a Paki.
There you go. And you became friends with all the Italians.
Yeah, I get friends with all the Italians. And then, what they did? They said, well, we had to call him something. He's called a slinky. He's a slinky. I'm like, what the hell is a slinky? I'm like some spring thing going, but knowing, if you know what I mean, I'm like, so they started calling me slinky from then onwards. It's not exactly a racial slur. It turned out that these guys are just a bunch of jokers who just wanted to put a name on you and you had to be able to take a joke.
Yeah.
If I was like any of the kids these days, not like kids, but any of these like people who can't take a joke, who can't take a racial slur to the face or something and get so offended, right? I would not be able to survive all that.
And that's the challenge too, right? That's because, and that, you know me, I love comedy, right? One of the things about
Yeah.
comedy is that it gives you license, it gives you liberty, it gives you the freedom to express yourself with the clause like, hey guys, I'm just trying to make you laugh. I'm not gonna, you know, what I mean, we're not trying to offend anybody. So sometimes jokes are offensive to some people. The whole idea is that you know, you know, you have to hear the intent, right? And what my point is that there's nuance. People need to really dig down, right, and uncover to see or to really hear what someone's saying. And again, if you can't fully express yourself, then how can you fully let someone know what you mean, right?
Yeah. So yeah. And the thing is that you see all these people. I mean, I know one girl, like she's from Nigeria. Now, this girl was born and raised in Nigeria. Okay. Before coming to this country, she's never known like racism between people of different ethnic backgrounds in terms of like there is racism in Nigeria. And even though she likes to call it colorism, is another thing with the liberals changing definitions and adding new words and changing new words. Calling someone a person of color is the same thing as calling them a colored person. It doesn't make a difference. And this is something that's an agreement by conservatives, centrists, moderates, and even classic liberals. I mean, you've got Bill Maher, who is a left-leaning comedian, in agreement with Jordan Peterson, a professor of the University of Toronto, who people see as right-leaning, though he doesn't really consider himself to have any political affiliations. He just speaks the truth.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing is, they have the same idea. I mean, Bill Maher had Politically Incorrect back in the 1990s. That was his show, right? And he thinks this is all garbage. And even he said the only thing that liberals these days, or not classic liberals, but the left, the only thing that they seem to do is change words and change definitions, and thinking that that's going to help the world.
Yeah.
And that's not true. It's not going to help the world. It doesn't change anything. You can call a dog a cat, or a cat a dog. It's still not going to change the fact that the dog is still a dog and the cat's still a cat, just by a different name.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what's happening with the left. They think that they can just change something magically by changing definitions, adding new terms, adding new words. It doesn't happen that way, right?
So
I can go and take something like this, or this pen, right? I can say, okay, this pen, I'm going to change the definition of gravity to mean that something that allows something to float, such that now, due to gravity, when I let go of this pen, it's going to float.
Yeah. Whoops.
Guess what? It didn't change.
Yeah. But you know what? You need to be free to say that, so I can point out the idiocy in that.
Exactly.
Like, exactly. You shouldn't be shut down. You should be left to, be left in the ether of the internet, and no one can follow you. That's fine if you're nonsense. If you have a YouTube channel, if somebody has whatever, they shouldn't be shut down. And even when they ban, let's go right back to the banning Trump on Twitter. That's one of the biggest mistakes I think Twitter ever did. Right? Not only did they probably hurt their business model big time. All the news media outlets have been, like 40% less ratings since, and all the viewership since Trump and everything. But the idea that you're going to ban the president of the United States from your platform, and you're supposed to be an open platform, you're supposed to be something, for the town square, right? It just makes no sense.
Even other world leaders are getting very harsh on Twitter because of it. They don't want Twitter interfering in their elections, and that's exactly what Twitter did. They interfered in the U.S. elections.
It's blatant interference. It's like absolute blatant interference, and there's no ramifications. There seems like there's no penalty for them. You can do whatever they want, and especially now that they're on the side of the party in power. My goodness, they had this ability when Trump was in power. Like, this is what scares me now. What's the next 4 years going to be like, or 8, or whatever?
Exactly, and this is just going to cause more trouble for them, especially when they block the president of the United States, Donald Trump, at the time, the former president, a man who was hard on human trafficking, and along with other liberals like Van Jones from CNN, who came together with him and various other people on both sides, really bipartisan, to help improve and create prison reform, right? So basically help on criminal rehabilitation and all the stuff like that. And so he changed that along with Van Jones and stuff like that. And on the other side, Twitter is allowing pedophiles on to speak out and talk however they want to talk about, including pedophiles who now call themselves, minor attracted individuals.
That's
again with
terrible.
the name changing. Alarming. They call them minor attracted individuals.
Well, wasn't virtually every protest / riot, mostly peaceful riots, weren't most of them organized and choreographed on Twitter and Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
okay. And yes. when the left puts out stuff on Facebook and Twitter and social media, that's 100% lie. I never see a fact check ever on any of that shit, right? But always see fact check on all the stuff that's kind of from the right, even though most of it is true that I've seen. So it's like we're obviously playing in a left sandbox where they've only let the right play for so long. It seems like they're clearly clearing out the right, but I guess even back to fundamental, free speech, right?
Yeah, I know, and that's the thing. And what we're seeing here is the erosion of free speech is happening, so that the far left can just keep pushing and pushing and pushing their agenda, going further and further along in a far leftist, socialist type of and more chaotic way of doing things. If you have a look at the fundamentals of conservatism and liberalism, conservatism is about order. Well, liberalism is about chaos, because it's ultimately about extreme freedom, right? If you look at extreme order, you end up with a whole bunch of rules, and eventually gets more and more constringent. So more and more stringent, more constrained. And if you go a little bit too much to the right, the constraints start to be a little bit ridiculous.
Oh yeah, totalitarian, right? For sure.
Exactly. It's totalitarian. It gets totalitarian on that side. But it's the same thing if you go to the right, it's also going totalitarian if you look at how it's going. And I remember watching this one show, which it was a psychological analysis of freedom and what it is, from a psychological standpoint. If you take a look at what freedom, absolute freedom is, just start where you are and keep removing a rule. Keep removing a rule. If you were to go into the biological standpoint, then you start removing other rules, which would eventually lead to you ceasing to exist.
Well, one of the things that I do want to say about freedom, though, is that, and I don't think this gets talked about enough, is that there's a lot of responsibility behind freedom, right? So a lot of the conservatives say, freedom of this, and we want to be able to freedom of choice of association, or even freedom to choose our education or our healthcare and everything. What the left oftentimes, what sometimes maybe people don't realize, there's a lot of responsibility behind that, of course, right?
Yes, of course.
But that's okay, especially when we're talking about freedom of speech. There's a lot of responsibility behind your speech, and that's okay as well. So it's more, I guess my point is that it's more important for have a society that has free speech, but but we're accountable for our words. That's more important than having a society that's not allowed to talk.
Well, yeah, but then
because without free speech, democracy
is concerned.
Well, democracy is done without free speech, right?
Yes, democracy is done without free speech,
and
as a matter of fact, without. Let's put it this: as far as the accountability is concerned,
too,
it's being tested by other people's free speech that allows you to test whether that thing holds up, right? So as far as the only accountability that should be held is that another person can come up and challenge that view.
Yes, like intellectual accountability, yes.
Exactly, and intellectual accountability.
Yes, so otherwise the last thing you want is people tell me it's shit, and by a better theory or proof,
and give evidence, proof, try and logically and reasonably demonstrate why your point of view or your statement is true.
Exactly, because how can you have any rational discussion without true freedom of speech? If you're constrained, or if I don't let you say what you want to say, what's the point of having a debate?
Yeah, there's no debate. I remember I've gone on so many debates with so many people, and there are just a lot of people that just don't know how to debate. Like
Yeah,
literally,
I know.
there's some people who just all they do is throw insults,
Well, that's the
especially
thing.
with the younger leftists,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
They
you're
just throw insults.
anything. I mean, because you can push 20 buttons that make you be a bigot, right?
Yes,
You say that, well, you're a bigot. Well, you're racist. Because I'm challenging your idiocy. Like,
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I'm challenging your point of view.
Yeah.
I've given you a logical reason as to why it's wrong
Mhm.
or why an alternative is right, right?
And,
So
and
why
we're
don't
seeing
you
that
try and do the same thing? Otherwise, you're not really proving anything,
exactly. And we're
right?
seeing that in every area too. We're not just seeing that in politics. I see that a lot, because my other podcast, I see that in nutrition. You see that all over the place. People are so dogmatic. People are set in their ways. And people don't want to flip to the other side and understand that, because it's hard to
Yeah,
realize that we have something to learn. But once you realize you have more to learn, you're always going to search for more, right?
yeah. Well, yeah,
No, it's funny the whole the speech thing, like um, everything from, I mean, like any good professor you've ever had, any good teacher you've ever had, any good priest or parent or any family member, like I mean, the ability to express themselves, like that's how we learn. We learn from speech. We learn from people giving honest speech and, like you said, truthful speech. Um, yeah, I think the intent behind a lot of shut down speeches, to try not to hurt people, right? But it's again, it's the snowflake generation that has been created. It started with the helicoptering parents, like, put bubbles around our kids and let's protect our kids so much. Now that they're even trying to protect them from harmful words. Like, how else? Like, what's the epitome of a soft generation? Is now the words even hurt them,
yeah.
right?
I know.
Right. Not only do we have to make lawn darts illegal because someone got their eye poked out, and I know it's dangerous, right?
Yeah, that's dangerous.
Seatbelts and all that
But
stuff. There's
yeah,
many things that are wonderful that we've done with regulations. But when you make it so, when you try to make it so safe that your fragile child or your fragile person, your
they
their idea
cry.
can't even, yeah, they're so fragile, right? Like, if I say something to you and it's terrible, you need to tell me it's terrible. That's
Yeah,
it, right?
like
You can do it in a
and
respectful
honestly,
way.
it's the millennials and that were like this, and the Zoomers that the starting end of the Zoomers that are like this. I think it's I think it's usually around like the half. It's like the second half end of the millennials, and it's the very beginning of the Zoomers. I'm not roughly around there that are like this. And it's the it's the fault of our generation, unfortunately, Generation X. Like we're on the tail end of it, right? You
Yeah,
and I.
yeah.
But it was that generation that raised these kids, and it's their fault for having basically not saying no to
Well, it's
your
gone too
kid.
far, right? The pendulum always swings, right?
Oh yeah,
It was too far the other way, right? Just like, in my opinion, we have another episode, probably 10 or more episodes on the whole the sex wage gap and all this stuff, right? There's so much to say about
jeez.
that. But it's like another thing. It's like the pendulum swings. Maybe there was, racism as well, right? Like, things swing, but then when they swing to a direction where it's bad
It comes
or
back.
too much, is that necessary in order to compensate back to a center? I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
and that's
we
what's
need to
happening.
expose
It's
that.
yeah, because if you go years back, the pendulum was all the way on the right,
Yes.
and it slowly swung towards the left.
Yes.
Now, I guess somewhere around the late 90s, early 2000s, it was practically in the middle,
Seemed like it,
and
yeah.
we were breaking stereotypes left and right. I mean, you had Martin Luther King's dream there that we should be judged by the content of our character and not the color of our skin.
Yeah.
So basically, don't judge a book by its cover, so to speak, but judge
Yeah.
a book by its content. Um, that was being met. We were
Yeah.
finally at that point,
Yeah.
right? And everything was just fine, to the point where we had a generation that now had nothing to really fight for. And what happened
Yeah.
is now they're looking for something to fight for,
Yeah.
but there's nothing to really fight for. So they make something up.
Yeah.
And they started with call out culture, the predecessor to cancel culture.
Yeah.
And even Barack Obama was against this, saying that this was not real activism, right?
Okay.
This was not real activism. Even Barack Obama said that.
Yeah.
So for all the leftists who go around saying, yeah, we're left and we're we're being progressive and all that stuff, think of that.
Yeah.
Barack Obama, the president of the United States, before Donald Trump, a Democrat president, he was saying that that's not real activism.
Well, why? Because he recognized the fault, like the error in it.
Flaws about it. Yeah.
Yes.
It's just you going on social media, calling out somebody for something that you think that they did wrong.
And A, you could be wrong. B, you could need more of the story. That's what I'm saying. There's so much value in nuance, and there's so much value in actually finding and asking the question. But because this quick news cycle, because of things like the government, and even during the elections, like how many times did Biden talk? How many times did they debate? How many times did he have any appearances? Like his inauguration, how many people showed up to inauguration? Like everything has been fast forwarded. It's like nothing happened. Let's just go. Nobody has time to talk. Nobody has time to debate. Nobody's time. I hear the new press secretary there answer questions, and I'm like, holy shit! They're so arrogant, so defensive. So why are you asking us those type of questions? Like I get that response when I hear that kind of stuff. I'm like, it's like, we need to ask those. Oh, it's crazy, but we need to keep on fighting, right? That's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of Centreville Voice, right? Is to find that moderate, right? Like that moderate voice, because like we said earlier on, and we can even touch on, like traditionally, I may have some views that are going to probably lean a different side than you will traditionally, right? Our upbringing, just our personal preferences in life, right? Our choices, our whatever, right? But I think that's, if we can maybe kind of go back to our mission and what we're trying to talk about as well. Is that right?
Yeah. And going back to our mission statement, and what we've probably come up with is to encourage and discuss logical reasoning, critical thinking, and civil discourse while promoting peace and love.
Exactly.
So, and that's the main thing, because you got a lot of people who are basically saying that the only way to fight hate is with hate.
Exactly. And that's the opposite.
Which is terrible.
Exactly. Right? And if you know what, every good book, every religion, every association, every spiritual person is always saying fight with love. And that's what we need to do, right? But love, in order to spread the love, you need to spread the word, right?
Exactly.
And
you had to have that, open conversations, civil discourse, critical thinking, not BS nonsense, saying and subjective emotional responses. And that's the problem with the way things are going, is that we are leaning more and more towards emotional responses and less towards common sense, and well, not as common sense, but less towards civil discourse with logical reasoning. Right.
I do. I think that as well. Like, I don't know if this is going to be controversial, but I think that when people get into politics, or when people start thinking about politics and start getting into activism, I think that when they're young, I think they think a certain way, right? And I think people have a tendency to be more left when they're younger, because I think they're, quite honestly, a little bit more naive. And I was that person as well, and I still am.
We were all at that point,
right? And I think it's hard for a lot of people to let go of those ideas and to let go of some of the ideas, because they feel like, well, even though it's not like this, it should be like this. And I get that, right? It should be like this. But in order to in my ideas, in order for us to get things like a certain way, we have to fight in the battle where you have some ground to stand on, right? Like you put your feet where in a position to stand on and fight. And that's the thing, is that like the left, I know people from the left, and like I said, I grew up traditionally on the left, where the left fought for the minorities, to fight, fought for women's rights, fought for low income and things like that, right? And they still should be fighting for that. And freedom of speech is like, how do you convey these ideas, and how are you supposed to convey these good ideas without speech? And that's why I feel like the left sometimes is making the mistake that they forget the party they are. Does that make sense? Like I think they forget the party they are.
Yeah, I mean, and that's essentially what it is. I mean, if you go back just like even like 20 years, right? Okay. You see that the left was far better off back then than it is today, right? During Barack Obama's time, even it was during his first term, it was fairly quiet, right? There were like wars and stuff that were going on, but as far as internal conflict within the nation is concerned, there was very little of it, relatively speaking.
Well, right? I mean, it makes you kind of investigate the question, or the question that people always say to you is systemic racism. I don't think there's a whole lot of systemic racism in the United States. Not anymore. And we've talked about in the past too, is that the U.S. is probably among the least racist countries in the world, if you think about it. So not to say that this is going to prove that a country is not racist, right? But if you do have a black president for 2 terms, does that do anything? It must do something.
I mean,
Or it might not do something. Sorry, it must
it
show
does mean
something.
something. And on top of that, I don't think it's just like racism is there. And it's, let me tell you something, it's never really going to go away.
It's individual
right?
racism,
But the thing
right?
is,
I think it's individual.
it is at an individual basis.
Yeah.
And the only way to actually combat racism is to essentially to have people of various backgrounds mix and meet and talk and all that stuff like that. I know that if you like, for instance, and most people in the KKK these days who are racist, that they're in the KKK, the vast majority of them don't have any real experience with anyone outside of their ethnic background.
Sure. Well, it makes sense. They're in their bubble.
Exactly, they're in a bubble.
Their echo chamber. It makes sense.
So what happens then is a lot of the, especially with the younger ones, they meet, and when they first meet with someone who is non-white, right?
Yeah.
They then start saying, okay, like let's say they meet with someone who was of Afro descent, and this person, fictitiously, let's say this person's name was, I don't know, George, whatever, right? So they were like, wait a second, and then they start hearing all the negative, bad, racist stuff that they hear from their grand vizier, and then they start listening to him, and then they think about their experience with George, and they're like, wait a second, George isn't like that.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, what they found is that with this experience, these people, the racism starts to go away.
Of course, it's
because
all about
they have
exposure, right?
It's exposure and dealing with them in a kind way, and being kind to them and being honest with them and showing them who you really are, not just through your words, but through actions.
Yeah.
Right. And doesn't mean if you go around just burning buildings and rioting and all that stuff, you're proving to them that you're a bad person and that everyone like you is a bad person, because that's how they do things. They will paint everyone with a broad brush. Guess what? The left does that too. Sure. Okay, these days the far left does that. They take everyone that doesn't agree with them, paint them with a broad brush, calling them a Nazi.
Well, that's what you do when you try and silence people. You're painting them with a brush that says you're turned off. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. They call them a Nazi, bigot, racist, whatever. Yeah. And they just try to cancel someone by saying, like, they go up to someone like you and they'll say, "Oh, you're a white male. You don't have a say in this."
Yeah.
Right. Which is
how dare I say
racist
something?
itself.
Oh yeah, right? For sure. If you think that I don't have the value to have an opinion, well, you're now you're discriminating against me, right? Like
that in itself, by going up to someone and saying, "You're a white male. You don't have the right to talk about this." That itself is a racist and sexist statement right then and there.
Exactly. And that's the thing that with like, there's two things I want to say. One, if without free speech and without you speaking about, like, someone in the KKK, how can you convert me? If I was in it, how can you show me a better way without telling me? How can you show me the errors of my ways? How can you show me love and, teach me a better way without that? It's and like I said, without free speech, you can't expose. You can't expose the danger, the evil, the even just misguidedness. A lot of things in life are not necessarily evil, but just maybe ignorance, right? Or misguidedness or misinformation. A lot of times people, I mean, most people I know that have ever been racist aren't racist because they have specific issues with certain people. It's because they've bought into generalities or the stereotypes or whatever it is, or they're raised with certain ways, right? The best way to not be racist is to realize that a race doesn't own being an asshole. A race doesn't own being cheap. No, a race doesn't own that. Everybody has the ability to piss you off equally in life. I mean,
exactly. And everyone can be a good person. Everyone can be a
exactly
jerk.
The same way everybody has the ability to show you love in the same way. So like, no one has that ownership. It's so silly to think that. That's like,
it's about your character. I mean, if I go back to my parents' country in Sri Lanka, right? That's like they try to think of themselves. They like to think of themselves as a multicultural society. Okay, because you've got Tamils, Sinhalese, Muslims. There are others that are there, like the Vaddas that are there, and several other smaller groups that are there.
Okay.
And and even amongst the religions, you have Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslim, and this they think of themselves as multicultural in a way. From an outsider looking in,
Yeah.
they look fairly homogenous.
Oh yeah.
Right. Or if you go to a country like Japan, they're fairly homogenous.
Sure.
But you go to any one of those countries, you're going to find people who are nice. You're going to find people who are jerks.
Yep.
Okay. And you're going to find people, even in those countries, who are racist.
Yeah.
And those who are not.
You'll be surprised.
So it doesn't matter where you go, whether it's Zimbabwe or Sri Lanka or wherever, or the USA or Australia.
Yeah.
You're going to find various people at various different walks of life based completely on their character and the way they were raised. It has nothing to do with this.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing that we fall subject to these days as well in the US and Canada, I guess in the West, is that it's like white people own racism as well, right? That's the other thing. White people own racism. Okay, so only white people can be racist. Try going to another country. Try going to Asia. Try going anywhere. I'm not saying that they're racist, but go see what it's like, right? It's like, the US is in the spotlight, of course, because we have we're a melting pot. The US is a melting pot, and they're, heavily scrutinized and everything. But it's like, it's white people don't own racism, it's not an episode about racism or anything about slavery or anything, but they also don't own slavery. We don't own any of that stuff, right?
And you wouldn't be able to know about that unless you actually challenged it.
Well, yeah, exactly. You need to be able to speak about that, right? And say, where did it come from? What did it, if without free speech, it goes back to the same idea. You need to be able to call out idiocy and things that are genius. You need to be able to give, both.
I still remember there was one documentary where this British, movie filmmaker went to a certain part of Africa, and they were riding through an area which was very forest, along a river, down an area that was very wooded, right? So a lot of trees and all that. They were passing by this little village, and they see this bunch of little kids jumping up and down and singing and waving at him, right? And they thought, oh, how cute, right? And then his guide, who understood what the kids were saying, right, that ended up translating what the kids were saying. And it turns out that it wasn't really as cute as you might think. It's funny when a kid says something, I guess, when they're like 4 years old, and they just look, and what they were saying is, hey, white man, you stink.
Oh, cute enough, right?
They're jumping up and down, like saying, hey, white man, you stink. I'm like, seriously? Right. Somebody smack these kids or something like that. Like, just someone just take them and just give them a scolding, because or whatever the case is, just set them straight. Because that's ridiculous. And they're allowed to say these things. So, and the thing is, and again, it's because of lack of exposure. Again, I'm relatively speaking, homogenous society from the outside looking in, right? So in terms of how people look, right? So of course, they see someone brand new and they're like, oh, hey, what's this, right? So until they find out about it, they have their preconceptions or even misconceptions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Des, what do you think? You want to let's just kind of remind people, I guess, what our whole goal is, right? Like I said, we want to, this episode, I think did you say we want to do 2 or 3 episodes on free speech? Because we have a few things to say.
Yeah, but I think we can keep going on this for a while.
Yeah, and I want
honestly, the way that me and you will we bounce off each other fairly easily.
Yeah, and I want feedback as well. I mean, people that are going to be contacting us and letting us know what their ideas are. I mean, people think, if you don't think it's a good idea, let me know. Let us know why, right? And we can talk about that. There's a lot of different examples we can get into, over the next couple of weeks. What else do we need to tell people?
Well, like, subscribe, and hit that notifications bell as well. One thing, if this is on YouTube, and any other else, make sure you share this video, because God knows that it's going to take a while for this to actually come up. And with the YouTube algorithm the way it is, it's going to be, it's probably not going to spread that much, depending on how things go.
That's okay. We'll get the ball rolling.
Certain words. Also, one thing that we like to do is what we're trying to do is do good. Do good in terms of helping people in need. So for those of you who are interested in supporting us on Patreon, 10% of any and all donations or Patreon subscriptions or Patreon's support that is given to us is going to go towards our charity of the year. Now, I think we're still working that out on which one was going to be. But so we'll let you know what charity that is. We have thought of, small charities, like we thought mostly about Soup Kitchen, Good Shepherd, which is a place where they give shelter to homeless folks. Many of the other homeless shelters and the like, which help. This is maybe our starting point. Exactly. We're going to be picking a location where we would eventually give all the money to at the end of the year from that 10% that we get. Cool. Sort of like tithing, in other words. Yeah. So if you want to see more of us, again, just make sure you share this video as much as you can. You can, if you want to support us and support our work, hit us up on Patreon. You can become a patron. And just spread the word about Centreville Voice, because we're going to definitely need help from you. And if you want to join the discussion, you can join the discussion with us on Facebook. We're available on Facebook on facebook.com/Centreville Voice. We will be setting up a Twitter account eventually, as well as accounts on Parler and other platforms, because we want to make sure that it's not just Twitter that has us, because everyone knows what's going on with Twitter right now. The last thing we want is to be censored. And we also have our own website, centrevillevoice.com, which we'll be posting articles and videos to as well. So if you want to check us out there as well, and that also helps out get videos from there. You can spread those videos up on Facebook and through social media, so that everyone is able to get the message, and also help us do good by providing us with the funds to help these charities that do so much good in people's lives.
So we got our email set up already, right?
Yeah, we got our emails set. So there's one for me, one for Carlo. We'll likely set one up for people to, if they want to send us a shout out or something like that. But we'll be sending out. We'd like you to mostly just leave comments on YouTube. You can join the conversation on Facebook. Check out the articles that are going to be on centrevillevoice.com. That's the best way to reach us. If you have a request or something like that, then you can always get in touch with us through Facebook or in order to find out if you want to have like a collaboration, all that stuff. And we're hoping that we'll end up having some guests on the show to see and have some other people there that will be able to put their own input in the conversation.
Thanks for joining in and watching Centreville Voice. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you are seeing this on YouTube, make sure you click on the notifications bell so you get notified when we upload new videos, which we release every Friday. Sharing and liking our videos helps promote the channel, and sharing episodes like these helps get the word out so that more people will get to see our videos. If you like what you see and or hear, please consider becoming one of our Patreon supporters. 10% of all Patreon supporter donations we receive goes to our charity of the year. You can visit us at centrevillevoice.com to learn more and engage with us on one of our social media pages. Thanks for your support, and we will see you again in our next video or podcast.